Welcome to Don't Get It Twisted, moving beyond politeness.
We came up with the idea to actually ask one another and ask each other publicly some really difficult questions.
Moving beyond just sitting politely and only reaching the edge of people's comfort zone. We don't have the opportunity to see where our story ends up. I'm gonna be real honest. I'm shaking inside.
The reality is we are still inside of this capitalistic system. Don't get it twisted, don't call me cute. I love it.
Charlie, you sent this book to me, My Grandmother's Hands.
Yeah.
And I'm not. It's this book that is talking about the two groups of people that they kind of, I don't want to say tackle, but they tackle, black people, white people, and police officers, and they're tackling like the generational and the individual trauma that these people have to like unpack and how to heal from it. And something that like blew my mind that I was thinking about. So it's talking about trauma that white people went through in order, like they had to go through some sort of crazy trauma in order to feel like they needed to oppress an entire continent of people, right? Multiple continents of people, actually. And so, look, all of the Americas and Africa, Australia,
it's a lot.
And so I was thinking, because like whenever people talk about this term ancestry, it's always in reverence of their indigenous and African ancestry. And I'm wondering, like, what is it? And we're always trying to like heal, do all this work so that our ancestors can heal and can be in peace or whatever. But what does it look like to acknowledge your European ancestry? What does it look like to do this work for your European ancestors? What does it look like to be unearthing the things that they went through in the Middle Ages and the Gide, all of the things.
I'm telling you, my ancestors is poor white trash is coming.
Poor white trash.
I really am gonna.
It's gonna be good.
In my I'm gonna write this book. It's gonna happen.
You need to, because they need some love too. The only reason why they weren't able to show the love is because they ain't ever get none.
Right.
We're still not getting none.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that ancestral healing, is something that I'm learning from, various members of CT. And I think that it is the white folk who need to do it the most.
Yeah.
And ours is longer, because the need to assert dominance comes from a fear of inferiority. Mm-hmm. And they've been doing that for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Right.
And to some extent, I with my Irish ancestry, I'm like, well, we're the first colonized people because, the British came right over and started, but, I got British ancestry too. And
but even inside of that, like the folks that you're talking about, right? Like I think as like, when we talk about like ancestral trauma and healing ancestral trauma, normally what we're talking about is like the victims of like this crazy oppressive historical like thing that happened of like raping and pillaging and stealing and all of the things. Mm-hmm. But also it's like you can't heal one trauma without healing the other. And the other side of that coin is that we look at our white ancestors as like a powerhouse, like these folks who came in and took everything and they raped and they pillaged and they're the other side of the coin. And the reality is we're talking about folks who came, let's say specifically to the Americas, right? Like we'll start there, but like who came to the Americas as the most impoverished people in their place, as the ones who were like didn't have any power and had to like then assert themselves somewhere else. And so then they did all this horrific crap to people in order to gain like some sort of power and sustenance, and wanted to like, and went through some horrible shit just to be like, I have the power now. Like, you know what I mean? It's so much more healing than I think we acknowledge. And that was like kind of the idea behind the like poor white child. Like, let's put that out of there, but like that was kind of the idea around that, is like, don't forget to heal your other ancestors too.
Yeah.
You know,
it's not too many times this is described as a dichotomy of oppressed and oppressor, as victim and what's the opposite of victim? I don't know.
Perpetrator.
Yes. Too many times it's that, but it's really this cycle. It's a cycle of somebody being victimized, then somebody being the perpetrator, then you're oppressed, and so you are oppressed, and so you oppress, and you're hurt, and so you're hurt. And oh my goodness, I was so excited by this one episode. I'm sorry, I'm gonna geek out for a second. By this one episode of Naruto, okay? Because y'all, when I tell you, my parents were like, I had my headphones on watching it, and my parents were like, what is going on? Because I was shouting, I was dancing, I was like, yes! Now, I'm not going to say that they have handled it in the right way, but what was happening was that this kid who was orphaned because his parents were killed in the war decided that in order to end the cycle of violence, he was just going to destroy the whole world and have everybody feel the pain that he has gone through. So he was just going to kill a bunch of people, and the only way that you're going to understand the pain that I'm going through and actually want to stop possibly is by if you feel that pain too. And so trying to figure, and Naruto was like, you can't do that, da, 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 I need to save my village, and I understand your pain, da, 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 all these other things. But the point is, like, how do we stop this cycle of violence? Because what I see right now is that I see us doing this, and as the whirlpool, like, as you get closer and closer to the whirlpool, we're spinning faster and faster and faster, and people are just hurt. People are just angry. People are just upset. And so what does it take to, like, swirl the other way and just calm down? Like, not necessarily calm down, but, like, just how do we stop the cycle? And I don't know the answer. And Naruto is not doing it is not giving me any answers right now, to be honest.
It isn't. And also it is the oppressor and the oppressed, right? Like it is both of those things at the same time. And I think that's what complicates it, complicates it further, right? Like, I think sometimes when we get, like, what I'm hearing a little bit is, like, sometimes when we get into these narratives of, like, the oppressed and the oppressor, we forget the people inside of it. Like, we forget the human being, like, the totality of a human being inside of that narrative. Like, we look at it as historical content, historical facts, but, like, there was a human being that got on a ship that was, like, praying to whoever it is that they believe in, that they would make it to some kind of, like, there was the human inside of that, right? And the reality is, even though that is a struggle, there was also another human being that was shackled, wondering if they were going to get thrown off the ship with the rest of them. You know what I mean? Like those experiences are vastly, vastly different, even though both difficult. And so I say all of that in terms of, like, where we exist now, there is a reality of like our version of the oppressed and the oppressor, which, like, for me, a huge example of that is, like, the white privilege that exists inside of, like, policing, right? Like, that is a reality. Like, that is an absolute reality. Do white people get punked by the police? Yeah, sure. It's real fucking different, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's real different.
Yeah.
And
I think there's a nuance in there. So that it's not just one or the other. That there's something more.
Mm-hmm. Charlie, you look confused.
No, not like I'm trying to listen and make sure I'm not doing that thing where you think about what you're going to say while you're listening to people say it. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm listening.
All right. So can I ask you a question then?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
All right, so we've talked about this idea of like the entire spectrum, right? Because I didn't think about this until right now, but literally we're kind of the pocket a little bit. But in terms of the work of Contratiempo, right, and like engaging in these conversations inside of the work, where do you think the line is between elevating these voices, elevating these conversations, and tokenism?
I mean, I think they both exist at the same time always. If you think about a spectrum, there are an infinities in a spectrum. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna back that up, but like, take a ruler, divide it into 12, that's like inches, right? Okay, divide that. Okay, divide that, divide that, divide that, divide that. There's an infinite amount of infinities inside any spectrum, any 2 points. There's an infinity amount of infinities. And so, yes, we have 3 tokenized people within the, the experience of the human experience right now. But there is an infinite amount of experiences in between each of us. Mm-hmm. And there's an infinite amount of experiences in between just me and the next white guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There is an infinite amount of infinite experiences. Mm-hmm. And to elevate a voice, the only reason you would do that is to empower one that hasn't been heard. Mm. And that's a very important and valid thing. That we tokenize for the purposes of uplifting, though. And that's important. Mm-hmm. You tell your story, which is not a story in the show. Sorry, I'm going to preface this. Toledo tells her story in the show, like her exact story. That is not an experience that many people have. And there is an infinite amount of infinite experiences that the Latina experience is. Mm-hmm. But there's a reason why we tokenize that experience, because it needs to be uplifted. Yeah. Because it hasn't been heard. And because, like, the profound effect of things like having a Black president or Black Panther, like the profound effect that I have seen that have on my friends, and the empowerment of like, oh, I could be this thing, is I don't think that I comprehend it, because every president looks like me, you know? I never really fully comprehended it until I got to sit front seat, and I still don't fully comprehend it in the way that my friends who actually experience it do, but I did get the great experience of getting to sit front row while people experience things like seeing someone who looks like them be uplifted and empowered. And so, is it a version of tokenizing to tell your experience as Latin experience? Yes. But it is important because it uplifts people. Yeah. And so let's do it. Do we need to add a little bit more queer theory to the general discussion of CT? Yeah. And do we need to apply that nuanced spectrumism to race theory? We fucking do.
I agree.
I have gleaned so much of a beautiful way to exist by choosing to not acknowledge boxes. Mm. And it is a really interesting thing to see how much we put boxes into our race theory, into our social justice work, into our conversations about what is cultural appropriation.
That's
I'm not kidding when I say I have been more gendered in the last 2 years being on CT than I have before.
Okay, can I ask? Because I think also, like, twofold.
Yeah.
I've been with Contratiempo for 578 years, and I'm also a Latina, and so I feel like I don't see it, right? Like, just for curiosity's sake, like, what are, like, maybe an example of, like, you sort of feeling, like, more gendered than you've ever felt in this space?
Just various versions of like, I mean, the fact that the question was about what's it like to be in a women's space, right? Like that's in the forefront of the CT mind is pretty present, and it's ever present. And you're the man, open the door for me. You're the man, carry the heavy suitcase. You're the man, like, and you know, I'm down with it. Like, I'm cool with it if it serves my community.
Right.
But I don't like that it's done in a gendered way. I'm down to support and uphold my community and my people. But the fact that there's an expectation through a gendered lens is problematic to me, because the thought that I am supposed to do that comes at the expense of the slightly more, like, the nuanced patriarchy is that, oh, you're not strong enough to do that. Mm-hmm. And you know, like those things do happen a lot, or like just like laughing at how there's certain things that I do that are like, me and my wife are very comfortable within our relationship and how we relate to people and all of this stuff. And there was one time when I said something about a party that I was at, or something, and you're like, I'm gonna tell you right now, if my man was at a place like that, I would beat the shit, like, right?
I still feel that way.
But like those kind of gendered assumptions about how you're supposed to exist, or I think they create pathway, like ingrained pathway trail narratives of how we're supposed to exist in the world that get very confused when we just step off of that ingrained pathway. Yeah. And again, I acknowledge that, like, it is the culture, and it is the language, and it is the ideology of you're this or you're this, and that there's no space for in between. But I come from the club world where it is about radical acceptance. And I come from the club world where there will be some people getting their freak on in the corner, and you're like, yeah, hell yeah, do that. And there are some people who are in the club, people show up and they're on drugs, and it is about non-judgment. Right. No matter what lifestyle choice, because you don't know what experience they had that made them say, I should take some drugs. And so it is about this radical acceptance within the club community that I run into. Is gendering doesn't have that radical acceptance. Mm-hmm. Gendering says you need to be this way, and you can't exist in any other way. And
that's fascinating.
And you know, like, if I want to paint my nails, I'll paint my nails. You know, like, if I want to exist as a man, no matter how I want to exist as a man, that is a valid way to exist as a human being. And I definitely know that I have run into those things, like the way that I will dress, or the way that I will express my hands as a man, that are not as ascribed to what a man should be, a stoic, you know, independent, doesn't communicate their feelings man, that are what I've definitely been socialized in, and I've definitely chosen to leave.
Yeah.
And you know,
can I cut you for 1 second? Can I throw this in too? Awacha. That reminds me actually of a moment in the work where we were doing the roller coaster thing. And for like those that don't know what that is, it's like an entire 5 minutes of like crying on stage in slow motion. And I remember that you had that conversation around like how difficult that was for you, because you feel like you've been socialized to not cry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is taking a hard left. I'm sorry, we're going that way. And bus goes this way. But I want to hear a little bit about that, like what that was about in terms of like, because for me, and maybe that is because I just discovered I got stuff I need to work on in terms of like this gendering Latina thing, because I was totally on board with your like, yes, let the freaks be freaks, let you come in with your this and your that and the other, and then there's stuff in my own personal life that I'm like, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, like that for me felt like a very gendered moment of like, okay, well, men are taught that they're not supposed to cry. So that's where that's coming from. Like that's where my brain automatically went.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm now realizing I might be totally and completely wrong about that.
No, it is what we're socialized to. This is a really fun nugget that is a concept that I really dive into quite a bit. Old German philosopher Hegel is his name, and he says this moment right here is a convergent of all moments that happened before this.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything that is happening in this moment right now is completely dependent on every moment that happened before it.
Mm-hmm.
And so my socializing, my perception, all of those things are converging into this moment right now. But at the same time, this moment right now is the potential for is the potential for all of the future. And so I treat this moment as this is us creating the pathway to what is going to be.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds fairly philosophical and like heady and shit, but basically, was I socialized as a man to this? Was I socialized to not feel feelings? In this moment, am I staying true to my feelings? Am I creating the possibilities for the new pathways? Am I creating the possibilities for what it means to be a man freed from the toxic individualism socializing? And so this moment, I am creating those possibilities and futures at all times. And it is this moment that is also dependent on all the past. So it can't be anything other than what it is because of the past, but it can be anything that it's going to be because of the future. And I derive a lot of hope from that because, you know, like my cisgendered, masculine, you know, fucking like socializing is something that I get to choose to dismantle in each moment. And I'm choosing to dismantle it in each moment as the pathway to what will be. And so the future is completely dependent on this moment right now, on me choosing to dismantle the past right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really beautiful philosophy that helps me think of and dream of the future and say that that future is contingent on this moment right now.
Mm-hmm.
I need to keep deconstructing the things. You know, like Liz Lerman talks about turning your discomfort into inquiry.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Why do I feel it? And this is Charlie's personal trauma, not white socializing trauma, but in my family, if I were to express emotion, it only got worse for me. With a torturous older brother and an alcoholic mother, right? Like if I chose to give into that anger, right, it meant I got a bigger ass whooping. And so I see the patterns and the histories that led to Charlie not being able to be fully expressed as a human being. And I know that we all do.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that past is converging on this moment where we choose to create the future. And so I am trying to create this moment where I'm creating the future of a freed Charlie. And I dream of that. I dream of like my people are fucking repressed. And that's what causes them to oppress. My dad cannot express emotions or feelings at all. My grandfather was like this grizzled, like did not know how to I don't think he said I love you to his family once, right? Like there is so much repression within the white identity that leads to their oppression. And that is the healing that I dream of. And that is like the ancestor trauma that I'm seeing is repression. Look at all of the popular religion and like, you know, you think that I'm just being shady on Christianity, but like it is extremely repressive. You have a thought, you have a feeling, that's bad, you have to repress it.
Right.
You have to repent of it. And Christianity today is not Christianity 50 years ago, is not Christianity 100 years ago, is not Christianity 400 years ago, where if you baptized your baby too early, then there was a holy war. Like, that is a very repressive, you gotta do it the exact right way or we're gonna kill you. And that is a type of trauma that the European identity has experienced. A different trauma, not trying to equate or compare traumas. There's infinities in traumas between those things. But the white experience, the people who have become known as white have a lot of ancestral trauma that needs to be healed as well. And that pathway for me is through radical acceptance. That pathway for me is because of the repression that our people have experienced. Mm-hmm. You get the high and tight, you don't have any other hairstyle option. You have to wear a business suit that is the exact same as everyone else. You look at old photos, there's not self-expression, there is assimilation. Mm-hmm. And that is the option that has been presented to a lot of POCs, is assimilate, right? But that was our repression from the get. And that is a trauma that desperately needs healing. To both be repressed into one form of expression, but then to think that this is not a collective identity, but this is your expression, is a bizarre concoction of humanity that leaves you in stagnation. And I truly believe that this is an engineered identity, bent on keeping the status quo. Bent on,
nugget.
Yeah, like I do. I think that the white identity is bent on keeping status quo. And the religious ideologies have been engineered towards that. The personal ideologies have been engineered towards that. And it is a buffer class into maintaining the class system as it is. Because if BIPOC people who have become known as white get together and they say, no motherfuckers, let's storm the castle, the people who are actually oppressing us, because there is not a lack of abundance in this place, but we've been convinced to fight each other instead of fight our way towards the people who are actually oppressing us in a class system. Mm-hmm. Then we would actually like have a chance at winning that fight. But because our identity is engineered towards this current status quo, that fight doesn't get to happen. The fight against the wealthy.
Right.
And that is our huge problem right now, is resource. And we've divided the power, white power, black power, Latin power, right? Like all of these things have been divided and then convinced that they should come against each other, when I do see that there is a very systemic class oppression also. And it's a popular thing for white folk to identify this as a way of dodging conversations of racism. And I want to make it clear that I'm not dodging the very intense amounts of racism, but I would say that if we could come together, that is a possibility. That restructuring our class system, that the 12 people who own as much wealth as 150 million people in our country should be restructured.
Yeah.
That the fact that, you know, Jeff Bezos pays 10% taxes when I pay 30% taxes.
Right.
Does that seem fair? Right? And it's not a Republican Democratic thing. I know I'm getting a little political here, but like Eisenhower was a Republican and he was taxing the wealthy 1% 90%.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we would have trouble educating our youth or paying for everyone to go to college or taking care of healthcare if they were paying their fair share? Right?
I saw the numbers yesterday that if Jeff Bezos alone, just him, got taxed 4.7%. That's nowhere near what the rest of us are getting taxed. If he got taxed 4.7%, we would be able to pay for all the crazy things that everyone keeps saying is insane, like healthcare and free universities for everyone and et cetera, on just his 4.7%.
Wow.
That's not even including the rest of these billionaires that exist.
I would say those numbers are a little off, but it's probably something close.
I don't know. I saw that. I'm just saying that's crazy.
I'm doing the mental math. I think he's worth 200 billion, which is
he's
insane
a
enough.
billionaire now.
He's not trillion.
Yes, he is. He hit the mark. It was a big thing at the top of the quarantine because of this quarantine and everybody ordering everything that they need.
I bet he's not even worth that.
He hit the trillionaire mark. Google it, Stanley. You see her little fingers right there? Google it. Google me, baby.
Not 196 billion.
Yeah, 196 billion.
But that's what I had heard.
Why do you believe in this work that CT does?
I believe in the work more than I believe in CT even. I believe in CT, but I believe in the work first and foremost. And for me to not be in this conversation would be the whitest thing that I could do.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a complete use of privilege to ignore it. And for white people to get over their repression, and for black people to get through their oppression, POC, to get over their oppression, we need togetherness. I don't think there's many times in history that there's been this relationship that Stanley and I have. I don't think there's been many times in history where there's been this relationship that I have with everyone in CT, where I have the permission to be wrong and I, expose the neck because I'm gonna be wrong, right? I've been socialized to be wrong. My identity has been crafted to be antithetical to your well-being. But I believe in this work because I believe that there is a need for an us. I believe that it is all a fucking farce, that race doesn't exist, right? Like science over and over and over and over and over again tells us that race doesn't exist, that it's just a social construct, blah, blah, blah. And I believe that we can start creating the society where it doesn't. I'm not talking about identity, but I am talking about the actual construct of race. I don't know where that exists, but I'm fucking down for the fight. And I don't know where it's gonna go, but I know that my well-being is tied to your well-being. Mm-hmm. And I can't sit with myself, and I know that's like super selfish, like it's not, I just believe in the great cause, but that'd be some white savior bullshit anyways. Fuck, why do I believe in this? It's selfish. I need freedom. And I can't be free until everybody's free. That's that work. Yeah, fuck it. I'm selfish. That's why I believe in the work. Fuck it.
Well, So thank you, Charlie. I'm gonna have a time editing all these F-bombs.
It's gonna be like a whole segment of bleep, 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 bleep. Me and you together is a very bad combo.
Lord. But it's okay. Thank you so much, Charlie.
Yeah.
We have moved beyond politeness. Peace.
Bye.